Welcome back. Today we're looking at a script for a long-form video essay, The Complete Guide to Existentialism.
It's an ambitious one. The goal is to take these huge thinkers, Nietzsche, Camus, Sartre, and make their ideas into actual usable advice for modern life.
Exactly. So let's get right into the feedback. I want to start with the very first minute, looking at tone and engagement. The script tries to hook the viewer by diagnosing their problems right away.
Yeah, it's a very punchy, direct opening, but I wonder if the reliance on what I'd call diagnostic language might actually backfire.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's this barrage of you statements. Things like, you live a life designed by default, or you mistake comfort for fulfillment. You are living according to scripts.
Right. It's trying to create a sense of urgency, to call out the viewer's pain points directly. I can see the logic in that kind of tough love approach.
There's definitely a place for tough love, but this feels different. There's a really fine line between a wake-up call and just an accusation.
And this crosses it.
I think it risks it. It creates a dynamic where the listener feels like a failure in the first 60 seconds. It's almost like the narrator is saying, you are lazy, you are a follower.
And what's the natural reaction to that?
Defensiveness. You put up a shield. If I'm listening to this and some voice tells me I mistake comfort for fulfillment, my first thought is, no, I don't. I'm just tired.
And once that shield is up, nothing else gets in.
Exactly. The rest of the video, no matter how brilliant, just bounces off.
Okay, so the goal is to invite them in, not call them out. How do we fix that but still keep that urgency?
I think we need a shift toward what you could call collective empathy. Rewrite that opening to use we instead of you.
Include the writer in the diagnosis.
The writer is in this boat too, almost certainly. So let's take a line like, you wake up already behind, already chasing. It feels like a finger in your chest.
Right.
But what if it was, we often wake up feeling already behind? It instantly changes the tone. It's not an accusation. It's a shared struggle.
It becomes a coalition.
Precisely. Or take, you live with a vague sense of dissatisfaction. Instead, maybe it's a common human experience to feel a vague sense of dissatisfaction. You validate the feeling as a universal condition, not a personal failing. You're saying, I'm in this boat with, not, I'm on the shore yelling that your boat is sinking.
That makes a lot of sense. You get the listener nodding along instead of shaking their head in defense. Okay, let's move on. Let's look at structure and flow, especially how the philosophers are introduced.
This is an area where the content is really solid. The research is clearly there, but the delivery is a bit conventional.
How so?
It just presents the big three, Nietzsche, then Camus, then Sartre, in this very linear chronological order.
Like a university syllabus?
Exactly, a syllabus. And the transition from Nietzsche's God is Dead to Camus' The Absurd feels like a textbook table of content. The risk here is that you forget why the listener clicked. They're here for answers, not a history lesson on 19th century European men.
I see that. When the script says, this is where Friedrich Nietzsche enters the story, it feels like we're pausing the advice to do a history lesson.
Right. It puts a barrier between the problem, that feeling of emptiness, and the solution. In a video essay, you have to earn their attention every few seconds. If you start treating the philosophers like museum exhibits, people just check out.
So how do we fix that? I mean, they are historical figures.
We should frame them as maybe competing voices in a toolkit, not just figures on a timeline.
A toolkit. I like that. So you introduce them as answers to specific emotional states?
That's the pivot. Don't announce Nietzsche's arrival like a character in a play. Frame it around the feeling.
Give me an example.
So instead of next up is Nietzsche, you could say something like, when you feel like the old traditions have collapsed, you're facing what Nietzsche called the death of God. You start with the feeling, then you attach the philosopher to it.
The feeling comes first. The expert comes second.
Always. For Camus, it's when you feel the universe is totally indifferent to your suffering, you're encountering Camus' absurd. And then you can really sharpen the transition between Camus and Sartre. Contrast Camus' internal stance with Sartre's demand for external action. One is for when you're stuck in traffic, the other is for when you need to quit your job.
That definitely makes the philosophy feel more like a survival guide than a lecture. Okay, let's shift focus to audience alignment. Specifically, the section on Camus and the absurd.
Yeah, the script explains the absurd really well in abstract terms. This mismatch between what we want and what the world gives. Eloquent.
But
It pivots to the myth of Sisyphus way too quickly.
Sisyphus is the classic example, though, isn't he? Pushing the boulder up the hill forever.
He is, and that's the problem. It's almost a cliché in philosophy content. Anyone watching a video on existentialism has probably heard the boulder analogy. It feels mythological. It doesn't feel like my life on a Tuesday.
So the listener tunes out because they think they already know the story?
They miss the nuance. The argument is that we need to bridge that gap between the high-level concept and the viewer's daily reality before we bring in the Greek mythology. We need to modernize the boulder.
Modernize the boulder. How do you do that?
We need to ground the absurd in modern, relatable, let's call them micro-futilities.
Micro-futilities. I love that. What does that look like?
Okay, so you describe the absurdity of clearing your email inbox. You work for hours, you get it to zero, you feel that brief moment of triumph.
And then you wake up the next morning.
And it's full again. That's Sisyphus. That's the boulder. Or, the absurdity of doing everything right with your diet and still getting sick. That is the universe not caring.
That hits much closer to home than a mountain in Greece.
It does. And if you use those examples first, then when you say we must imagine Sisyphus happy, it hits so much harder. You're not imagining some Greek hero. You're imagining yourself being okay while answering those emails. It makes revolt, the idea of refusing false comfort, feel applicable right now in the office.
It takes the philosophy out of the ivory tower and puts it in the cubicle. Love it. Let's move to Jean-Paul Sartre, especially bad faith and radical freedom.
This is a really dense section, and the script moves, I think, a little too quickly from condemned to be free right to the solution, which is action. It says bad faith is comforting, but it sort of glosses over why it's so seductive.
The script seems to treat excuses like I'm just an anxious person as things we can just discard easily.
Right. It dismisses them as just excuses. But to the listener, those aren't excuses. That's their identity. It's their reality. If you just tell someone to stop making excuses, they won't. You have to validate why they cling to those ideas first.
Because those phrases are a shield. They're protecting them from something.
From responsibility. Exactly. If I say, I can't write a book, I don't have time, then the world is at fault. If I say, I won't write a book because I choose to watch Netflix, well,
Then you're at fault.
and that hurts. So to make this stickier, I'd suggest adding a reframing exercise right into the script. Slow down on that I choose not to idea and make it the highlight of the whole Sartre section.
So you act out the internal dialogue?
Yes. Don't just explain it. Have the narrator say something like, listen to the difference. I can't find time to write makes you a victim. It feels safe. Now say this. I choose to prioritize comfort over writing. Feel that?
That's uncomfortable.
It should be. The script needs to stress that Sartre's point isn't to shame you, it's to empower you. If it's a choice, it can be changed. If it's a trait like, I'm just lazy, you're doomed. Bad faith is a prison. We build because it feels safe, not just because we're lazy. We need to sell the freedom that comes with that uncomfortable guilt.
That's a powerful distinction. Okay, finally, let's look at the conclusion, the part about the leash of approval and hell is other people.
The ending is strong on its own. It talks about social media validation, measuring success internally, all good stuff. But from a relevance perspective, it feels a little disconnected from the rest of the script. It's treated like a final, separate issue, an add-on.
So it's presented as the final boss, but you're saying it's connected to the very start of the journey.
Exactly. That fear of judgment is often the root cause of the emptiness and the scripts mentioned right in the intro. The connection needs to be circular. It needs to close the loop.
How do you do that on the page? How do you weave that thread back?
You have to state it explicitly. Say that those scripts from the intro, go to school, get a job, buy a house, those are the mechanisms of approval from the conclusion. They're the same thing.
So you connect hell is other people directly to why we feel empty in the first place.
Absolutely. You say something like, remember those inherited scripts we talked about? That wasn't just tradition. That was your fear of the look of the other. And then you tie the final call to action, measure success internally, back to Sartre's ideas of action and responsibility.
So it's not just stop caring what people think. It's create your own values to replace theirs.
Yes. And you make it clear that an internal measure is the only real way to survive the absurd. Then the outro needs to be a challenge, not a fade out. Something like, the world is silent. You've been waiting for permission. It will never come. You must speak.
That brings a really satisfying narrative closure to the whole piece. Okay, let's recap the main takeaways.
This is a tough topic, but a few strategic shifts could make a huge difference.
First, shift the tone. Change the accusatory you to an empathetic we. It builds a coalition and validates the viewer's struggle.
Second, break that history lesson structure. Don't use a timeline. Frame the philosophers as a toolkit for specific emotional crises. Start with the pain, then bring in the philosopher.
Third, ground the absurd in reality. Before Sisyphus, talk about the email inbox and the laundry that never ends. Make the futility familiar so the solution feels real.
And finally, close the loop. Connect the leash of approval at the end directly back to the scripts and emptiness from the beginning. Show that fear is what holds us back from creating meaning.
This is a powerful topic. We'd love to see the script together once you've had a chance to tighten that narrative arc. With these tweaks, it could really resonate.
Absolutely. The potential is definitely there. It's about turning good philosophy into great storytelling.
That's all for this critique. We look forward to seeing the next draft.
Keep writing.